All right, what if you could trade your home for a life of adventure, living full time in properties around the world that you book on Airbnb without ever looking back?
We were there for about 3 more months, closed everything up, got rid of probably close to 95% of our possessions we got rid of, put what was left in a storage unit and hit the road.
Meet Marissa and Eric Dingler, the family that packed it all up, sold it all, and turned the world into their home.
And I think just knowing, like, are you equipped to host long-term? And if you're not, don't say you'll host long-term. Like, just have that in your head, I think, is the biggest key.
Marissa and Eric have stayed in over 30 different short-term rentals across America and around the world, from Costa Rica to Liverpool, and they definitely know what makes a short-term rental feel like home.
Spend the weekend in your own property with the maximum number of people that are you rent it to, and you'll very quickly discover, like, oh, we should have more than 4 cups, and just all the kinds of things like that.
My name is Jason Muth. I'm a 31-time Airbnb superhost. I worked in the media business for over 25 years, and in 2016, I started my Chapter 2 through short-term rentals. Since then, I've welcomed over 5,000 guests and their furry friends to our homes, and we're here to show you how to create a smart stay. Now, here's the show. All right, Rory, this episode of Smart Stay Show is going to be super interesting because we're actually flipping this around a little bit, and we are having a conversation with short-term rental guests, regular guests, people that are digital nomads. Very different from a lot of the other conversations that we've had on this show, which usually involve other hosts, people in the industry, best practices about operating a short-term rental. But Rory, we wanted to kind of change things up a little bit this time.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone into detail about how short-term rental investing can really, transform your lives and allow you to shape the lifestyle that you want. But we've kind of omitted the conversation about what the existence and the proliferation of short-term rentals, what does that enable for people who want to travel and build a lifestyle through that. So I'm very excited to have on our guests today.
They're living a really cool life that a lot of us could probably aspire to live if we ever want to just pack up and hit the road with our kids and see the world. Please meet Eric and Marissa Dingler. Eric and Marissa are coming to us currently from Liverpool in the UK. What's going on?
Wow. Hey, well, we're really glad to be here. And yeah, in Liverpool currently, we're going to be here for 2 months. Going to explore some of the, stuff with the Beatles and having a great time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on the show.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. So as people who have stayed in, how many short-term rentals have you been in so far?
I think our number, it's either 32 or 33.
I will admit, and Rory can attest to this, that I have certainly not stayed in 33 different short-term rentals. Rory, have you?
No, I mean, probably less than 10. But hearing your story and getting in what you're doing, I really my burning question to start off is, what got you into this? Where did the idea to travel come from, especially knowing that you have kids and all the complexities that come with that?
Yeah, do you want me to take it or do you want to take it?
Go ahead. Okay, take this one.
Okay, so getting started it wasn't like we woke up one day and had this idea, we're going to get rid of everything. It was a slower concept. So Eric had this idea that we could go on a shorter trip because we didn't have anything happening one winter. It was a January, February, March, and we had no sports for the kids, nothing. We had nothing with the kids. It was like a season of nothingness, which is rare when you have 4 kids, but it would just happen that way. And he said, we've been wanting to travel. What if we decide to just go on a trip for those 3 months? And I said, sounds like a great idea. And so we talked to our landlord. We were renting a house in Norfolk, Virginia at the time. We talked to our landlord and we said, hey, we're going to be gone for 3 months. We totally understand if you want us to clear the house out so you can get other tenants, or we will pay you 50% of the rent and we'll be back in 3 months. And he said, I don't want to deal with getting new tenants. 50% per month is fine with me. Have fun. And so we winterized the house. We didn't have to do much because it was like Southern Virginia, but we still like did some stuff so the house would be safe while we were gone. And we were gone for 3 months. During that time, we said, we love this. We want to keep doing this. We had conversations with our kids. At that time, the youngest was, I think, 10 and 9 now.
Yep.
And so our youngest was 9. So we had 9, 11, 14, 15 at that time. And all the kids said, yeah, we love this. This is great. Let's keep doing it. So we went back to the States. We were there for about 3 more months, closed everything up, got rid of probably close to 95% of our possessions we got rid of, put what was left in a storage unit and hit the road.
That's got to feel great to declutter so much. There was a show that Rory and I discovered, or I discovered it, then I turned Rory onto it. It's on Peacock, called The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning, or something along that line. And it's something that I guess they do in Sweden. And it was a reality show. It was a lighthearted one. Amy Poehler hosted it. And it was basically trying to go in and tell people to, declutter their lives so they don't leave it for the next person, and then figure out what to get rid of, what has sentimental value, what still has a story, and then, figure out what to do with that stuff. And now that you've gotten rid of 95% of your stuff, you're not held back by your stuff. And you get to see the world many, 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 many years before you even have to do a Swedish death cleaning like that, because you're both pretty young.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. For our first 3 years, we traveled with carry-on luggage only. And so very extreme minimalist. This last November, we did add a carry-on or a check bag, 1 suitcase, which was a big conversation. It took several weeks. We actually went to stores and test drove suitcases, because for us, it's like putting an addition on the house. Like, it was a big deal adding that much space. And but yeah, so we still travel, though, very light.
Yes.
So we want to set the stage with your story as to why you're staying in so many short-term rentals. And thank you for sharing that at this point. You are going to give us some great insight as to what has been working really well, from the perspective of the host, and what things Airbnb hosts are just lacking. You're more of an expert than many people that we've spoken with, because you're the one that's physically staying in the space. So first of all, let me ask, are you renting everything off of Airbnb?
There's been one house we didn't rent through Airbnb. And then the house we're currently in, we found it via Airbnb, but we took the contract out of Airbnb because it's also listed with a property management system here in Liverpool. It's dually listed, and it's cheaper to go via the property management versus Airbnb. And so this time we did that, but that's been the only time this time. And we were in Costa Rica it ended up being a year. And that house was not an Airbnb either. That was a property that was found for us I was in Spanish school learning another language, and the school has local landlords that they encourage people to use to help the local economy there. And so that house wasn't Airbnb either, but everything else has been Airbnb.
And as you search for properties, like, what are the things that, as digital nomads that are literally showing up with all of your possessions, period? Like, what are the things, the top, say, 3 things or so that you look for when you make an inquiry about a property?
So I would say, it depends on where we're talking about in the world, because price always comes first. Always, always, always. But then if I had my wish list, if you will, of every house ideally would have these things, it would be 5 beds in bedrooms. It's really hard when you need enough beds per person. And so over in Belfast, our kids had to share beds, actually, which we were only there for just 4 weeks. And so to share a bed with your sibling for just 4 weeks is not that bad, but it's not ideal. And so we don't want to do it long term. And so 5 beds, so then everyone can have their own bed and not be on like a pull-out couch, because that just gets uncomfortable. Like, that's not how you want to live. You don't want to live from one pull-out couch to the next.
For a week, yeah. For a weekend, there are a lot of times we're in houses and it's like, if we were here for the weekend or this is set up for a weekend stay or, even a week, like it's totally doable if you're on vacation and, the kids are sleeping on the pull out, bed in the living room that they've counted as a bedroom.
Yeah.
Again, on vacation, that's no big deal. But when you're looking for a place to stay for 3 months, we've rented some for, 5 months at a time. Those ones were a lot more choosy on the actual floor plan and being able to discern what are they counting as calling a bedroom?
Yeah.
Is it really? And so stuff like that. So that's some of the things we look at.
Yeah. Another thing is the amount of bathrooms. That you can't change that in a house. You can if you want to do renovations, but uh, for us, for long term, at least two toilets is ideal. Two full baths is great. That's luxury to have two full baths in a short term rental. That feels really, really special. And then another thing that we absolutely love, if I could put it on the wish list, is a washer and dryer. That is chef's kiss. That's fantastic.
At least depending on the culture.
Yeah.
At least a washer.
Minimum
Some
washer.
cultures, like nobody has a dryer. But washer and dryer are nice.
Yes. Yeah. And then everything after that, like we have like other things that we're like, oh my gosh, it has this. That's amazing. But it doesn't have to have that. So like a bathtub. We don't have little kids anymore. Our youngest is 12. So we don't need a bathtub. But we have teenage girls who have discovered bubble baths, right? And so if we get a bathtub, that's fantastic. And they love to just have a bath and like read a magazine in the bathtub, right? Like,
But let's talk about the bathroom for a minute while we're there.
let's do it. Can we talk about
bathrooms for a second?
Absolutely. Let's talk about bathrooms.
My probably biggest pet peeve with a short-term rental is one where it's, I think, obvious that the host has never spent the night in the place with the number of people they say can live there. So if you say our place is for 6 people, it's kind of easy to tell if you've ever been there, because if there's only 4 plates, you've never stayed there with 6 people. So when plates and utensils don't match up with the number of people, that's it. But in the bathrooms, there have been so many times the bathroom has been remodeled and it looks amazing. They've been inspired by some picture they've seen, and they've recreated a beautiful bathroom with no place to hang a towel, no place to set your clothes while you're in the shower. It is my biggest pet peeve when I go into a bathroom in a place and it's totally unfunctional. Oh, it looks good.
It's very aesthetic.
Yeah.
It's not functional. Honestly, guys, like he's so passionate about it. Like he will walk out of a bathroom and go, "There's no place to hang the bloody towel." He's very passionate about it.
Very frustrating. And I'm like, if they would just spend the weekend in your own property with the maximum number of people that are you rent it to, and you'll very quickly discover like, oh, we should have more than 4 cups, and just all the kinds of things like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. But bathrooms are definitely his, like,
make them functional. Give me some place to hang a towel.
his area is bathroom. Like he could talk bathrooms and like what they need for probably 45 minutes. Mine's the kitchen. Cause I'm in the kitchen a lot. We have 4 kids. I'm cooking for 6, like, because this is our lifestyle. So I think a lot of people, when they're doing like a vacation, maybe they don't want to cook. And so you need very, very minimal in a kitchen, right? Like if you're on vacation, you need cups, plates, cutlery, maybe a cutting board to cut up some like fruit or snacks, whatever. And that's where like you're not doing like all the cooking, a microwave, and you're good to go. But like this is our life, and so we need like a really fully equipped kitchen. So like for me, it's like, oh shoot, there's no spaghetti strainer. Like we don't have that, or there's not a 9x13 baking dish. There's just this small little like dinky 8x8 thing. Like what am I gonna do with that for 6 people? Like for me, it's the kitchen and like all these little details. But
They'll have a really nice fancy toaster that looks great on the counter in the picture, but it's the things that make a place functional are the things that we find that are most often lacking.
Well, I just think it's this difference between, do you want to host long-term guests or do you only want to host short-term guests? Because I do think that there's a big difference between a short-term guest and a long-term guest. And we've been at properties that they have listed on there no long-term rentals. Like, because you can do that in Airbnb. I'm not sure about Vrbo or anything else. I'm assuming you could just say, hey, we don't do long-term rentals. But there's been some.
You could restrict the length of stay. Absolutely.
Perfect. Yeah.
Restrict the length of stay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I've looked at Vrbo and others, but we've never used them, so I'm not super confident talking about them. But there was one Airbnb we found, and it said we don't do long-term stays, and I just reached out to the person and I said, I totally understand you don't do long-term stays. Is there a reason that you don't do them? Did you have a bad experience because your house is in a great location? We would love to stay in it. It seems to have all the amenities. And she just said, we're not equipped. We don't have all the things. We don't have double bedding for you to change the bedding. And we don't have a washing machine, so you can't wash your own bedding. And I said, totally understand. Got it. And I think just knowing, are you equipped to host long-term? And if you're not, don't say you'll host long-term. Just have that in your head, I think, is the biggest key.
No, I mean, that's an interesting contrast there between two competing things. From the host point of view, you want to have the primary rooms the most photogenic they could possibly be. So you want that great looking bathroom because that's going to generate a lot of interest when you're marketing the property. One thing we've learned, we've definitely stayed in every place that we own multiple nights, getting them ready, in part for this reason, so that we know what it feels like. We have plenty of towel hooks, for example, for that reason. We've been there and we got tired of draping the towels over the sink, the toilet, whatever. So we know to put certain things in there. But the interesting thing is early on, we had some guests who, they cook a little bit differently than us. They need different supplies than we normally need. So we kind of built up a longer list in the beginning for different things. But that's an interesting concept there, or contrast there between what you might want for a short weekend stay and definitely a longer stay. When you're talking about location, so you're going traveling for longer stays, but I'm assuming when you visit a destination, you want to be, in the center of things. But is the location you're picking a little bit different than maybe somebody who's going to check out Liverpool for a weekend? Are you open to areas that maybe are farther away from the center of town? How do you choose your locations when you travel?
Yeah, I would say for us, a lot of times we look for just how close is it to, public transportation? That's the key. Where's the closest? We don't mind being on the outskirts. We really prefer to be in more of a suburb community area. We generally, because we generally also look for a church to get connected with. That's the easy way for our kids to find community because we homeschool our kids and stuff like that. So we look for that. And we don't want to be near the party scenes or the loudness. We like being on a quiet street. Here in Liverpool, we're on a really quiet little side street. It's great. But 2 blocks away, is a little convenient grocery store we can, walk over to get a gallon of milk or whatever, because we're not traveling with a vehicle. But then we're also really close to bus stops. And so we can jump on a bus, go somewhere. And then for me, we also look for somewhat convenient access to also then co-working spaces. There's only been one place that said it was set up for a dedicated workspace that was actually convenient. And that was in Costa Rica.
Peru.
Oh yeah, Peru's did. That's
Peru had one
that's
too.
true. So we've had 2 out of the ones, but the rest of them, it's dedicated workspace and it's a little corner, a desk in a corner in the kitchen or the living or the dining room. That's not really a dedicated workspace when I'm trying to work, 40 hours a week.
in like a long term, like he's going to be working there up to 8-10 hours a day versus, oh, like, yeah, I'm going to be here for a week and I'm going to want to check my email, maybe do like an hour's worth of work. And so a little like desk thing in like the kitchen dining room area is totally functional for that. It's not functional for someone that wants to live in your place for 3 months and you have 4 teenagers that also have to do homeschool and then he's in meetings. Like it doesn't work. Like we've learned that dedicated workspace, like if that's checked on Airbnb, like it's not functional for us. I literally ignore it because I'm like, that just means that there's a desk somewhere in like the kitchen, probably.
And normally the router's so far away that the Wi-Fi signal's terrible and it's too far to run an Ethernet cable. So I look for, so we're in my co-working space right now in Liverpool, and it's about an 18-minute walk to our apartment, which is fine.
I'm really good at taking, because like you don't get the exact location, which I totally understand until you've booked. But I've gotten really, really good at finding homes in Google Maps. Like if you know how to read maps pretty good, you can find the space. And so like I'll just drop a pin there and I'll just in Google Maps I'll go, okay, grocery stores. Okay, here's the grocery store. So I can walk to a grocery store from this dropped pin in 6 minutes. If it's over 20, the house is out. Like if I can't get to a grocery store within 20 minutes of walking, I can't live there because I don't have a vehicle. And so I grab that. I drop a pin in Google Maps and I just do all my searching for the important things there. And if it works location wise, then it's in the running.
I think another way you might want to do that or could do that is you could, probably reverse image search some of the pictures because sometimes people will use the same ones as a listing, so you could always like right click, save, whatever, and then try to do a Google search for that image and see if it pops up on a map or for a real estate listing, and you can kind of see what's to buy. But yeah, there's very sleuthy ways to do this, like sleuthy ways that people can try to circumvent Airbnb if they made an inquiry from Airbnb because, like if you inquired to me on Airbnb, I go through with the transaction on Airbnb because I can't take it off platform. It's against terms of service. But what people do sometimes is they'll put the name of the property in one of the photos or they'll casually mention how they can be found in other ways, because you probably know that we can't share URLs, email addresses. There's even keywords that get blocked, like, before a booking happens. I can't write the word Google in a message thread unless you've already booked it because they will flag that and they will basically redact the word because they just don't want us to go off platform. And we love Airbnb. I'm one of the ambassadors for Airbnb here in the United States. We we appreciate the security and the vetting and everything that Airbnb provides, but we also give an option to book directly for guests if they choose to do that. Like, we make the same amount of money, frankly, but the guests get to save some money if they want to go off platform.
We will never, just to interrupt, sorry. We would never go off platform renting from an individual though. Like it's one of the things we've talked about. Like that's a hard, fast no. But because like here, this was a management company that had like, that was fine. Now, luckily, out of 33 times, we've only had to involve Airbnb support with one landlord. But thankfully, we had that, or we would have been on our own. So that's just one caveat. Like I appreciate the security that Airbnb provides me when I'm renting from a private owner. So I would never go off platform.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of protection for both sides of the transaction when you do go through a platform like Airbnb. And, there's so much spoken in the podcast world about short-term rentals and why direct bookings are important. I totally understand that. But I also appreciate these platforms. They put so much money into marketing the properties. If you click on a property as a potential guest, it probably follows you around the internet with retargeting ads. It probably targets you on email. And, that is not cheap, right? I get it. I don't have to lift a finger to do that. That's, part of the fees that we all pay toward Airbnb. So since you have so much experience in staying in these properties and dealing with hosts, and this is Smart Stay Show. We're trying to teach people how to create a smart stay for guests. What makes a good host?
And what are some things that the not as good hosts have done that put them in that category?
Oh, this is like my favorite question. Because I have this idea that I would make. Oh, I probably just like really got loud. Sorry about that. I smacked my microphone. I have this idea in my head that I would make a fantastic Airbnb host. So that there's no proof to that. I just think I would. Um, so a good host, I think the first thing is communication. I don't think you can communicate like you can over communicate with your guests. Like don't just like we had one that would just like send us a random message like hope you're doing good today. Like I'm fine. Like, I don't need you to be my friend, but we do need to have a good working relationship. And so finding that balance in communication, both before the guests arrive and as they're arriving and getting settled in, especially long-term stays. Because like that first day, you're just still getting to know the house. Like you don't like those first few hours, you don't know if like if everything's okay. So when a host just instantly is like, "Okay, I hope everything's great," and they're just assuming in those first couple hours that a long-term guest is going to tell them if there's issues, if they're not issues, they don't know yet because I haven't gone to cook the meals that I generally cook. And so while I do, anytime we get to a new space, I look through everything and I try to let the host know immediately if I know, oh shoot, there's not one of these fill in the blank in the bathroom, or we don't have enough towels, or like they know that there's 6 of us and there's the amount of times we get to a place and there's only like 4 towels. I'm like, we just know.
This house has 5 dining room table chairs. They know they rented to 6 people, but there's only 5 chairs.
The other chair. So like those kind of things are kind of obvious and I message right away like, hey, but then there's other things that you don't know immediately. And so I think just having that open communication so that your guests can feel like I am allowed to message you about things. Like you don't just have this 12-hour window at the start to get everything checked off the list because maybe you don't know yet. Like maybe I don't know if there's not a can opener because I haven't had to open a can yet. Like I don't know. Like, but then I go to open a can 6 days later and hey, there's not a can opener here. Problem. And so just being patient and open with that communication, I think is really important. Um, Also just be kind. Like I just I think something that really turns me off with Airbnb hosts, we've had 2 bad Airbnb hosts. Only one though we had to get Airbnb support involved in. We probably should have with the other, but we were very young into Airbnb world, and I think we just were feeling like, no, it's like whatever. But it was bad. Um, but both of those people were just very unkind, and they took responsibility for nothing. Everything was our fault when none of it was our fault. But somehow it became our fault, and I'm just like, we've stayed in multiple Airbnbs. The woman where we had to get support involved, we had at this point stayed in about 30 Airbnbs already because this one just happened. And so, but everything was our fault. Like the radiators not working was our fault. I'm like, you need to get a repairman. Like a repairman had to come to our house 4 times. So how is this my fault? Just like not very kind. And so I think kindness goes a long way as a host. So communication, kindness, and also just asking questions. Like not like the random, oh, I hope you're having a good day. But set like a reminder on your phone to be like, oh, it's their halfway mark. And just shoot them a message and say, hey, you've been here like half the time's up. How, like, is there anything we can do to make the next half even better? Like, let me know. I want to hear. Tell me the things. And just be open to hearing. Like, if someone criticizes your property, they're not criticizing you as a person. Like, just because you don't have enough silverware or like your steak knife or, oh, doll knives. All Airbnbs have doll knives. Like, it just happens. It just happens. Like, and so when someone tells you, oh, your knives are really dull, I think you should get them sharpened. That's not an attack on your humanity. Like, you're a fantastic person. Like, don't get offended by that. It's just like, oh, you know what? Yeah, we probably should get those things sharpened or buy some new ones or whatever you want to do. I don't care. It's not an attack on you. So just be open to to that kind of stuff.
We've put knife sharpeners in the properties that we own, like small little handheld ones you could buy off Amazon. Just give it a couple rubs inside it, and suddenly the knife is a little bit sharper. We've also learned there's like Amazon's got such great stuff. Like you don't have to get like the highest of high end everythings. But we've also learned to put some steak knives in our properties. Now, I think I have enough at each of them, but I'm not 100% sure. But there's this great little block of 8 steak knives and cooking knives you can get off Amazon for like $60 or something. Put that in the property, and it usually solves the purpose of dull butter knives that are being put in there to use to cut meat, which clearly is not something, especially our properties in New Hampshire where we're grilling all the time, right? And I'm guessing our guests are grilling all the time. Although I do have a funny story about steak knives of all things. One of our properties, the one that we built, Camelot Chalet, we've talked about that on this podcast a lot. It's the one that flooded, which you guys don't know about. That's a whole separate story, but we're back up and running right now. The dishwasher has a top rack for silverware, which Rory, you and I have here at our property. Our cleaner didn't know. She had no idea that there was silverware up there. So once I get a message saying, I think your guest took the steak knives. And I'm like, it's kind of a strange thing to steal, of all things that you can steal. But okay. So I actually put in for an insurance claim for it with a company that we work with separate from Airbnb. They paid out for the new steak knives. I bought new steak knives, and then I was there one day with her, and I showed her the top rack, and she's like, I didn't know that was there. And I'm like, maybe that's where the steak knives were, because that's where I found them. So now we have more than enough steak knives at that one property. Rory, you and I can host a large banger if we want to.
There you go.
You're good to go then.
Yeah. So we're, I think that, Marissa, you would make a great short-term rental host because you have some experience staying in these properties. And it probably is something you should look into if you want to host remotely, because there's an awful lot out there about running, co-hosting businesses and everything where you are the host on behalf of clients. I have like rapid fire questions I have just in my head right now for some specific nuts and bolts that we talk about a lot of times on this podcast. What percentage of the places you've stayed at would you estimate have like an interactive guidebook, like a link to something, as opposed to a printed guidebook in your property?
Oh gosh. One had a printed guidebook. Two had a printed guidebook. Sorry. Two had a printed guidebook. One has given us an ebook type ebook. We'll put that in air quotes.
Yeah.
So 3.
Yeah.
So whatever.
Not many. It'd be very handy.
Yes.
So 30 places didn't give you any kind of guidebook or instructions as to what to do when you checked in?
Like for as far as here's some
Just
good
overall.
restaurants.
Yep, all that. Yeah, good restaurants, things to do. Like, here's how the HVAC works. Like, what happens if you run out of this?
No, but you have to keep in mind a lot of our places have been in Central and South America and Eastern Europe.
Yeah, it'll be, we get information on how to get the lockbox, or
we get the check-in info.
in some places, they meet you there, which is fine, but just realize
It's not.
Yeah, just realize that the people have been traveling for a long time, and maybe come back if you want to get to know them. But we've had some people that we can't get rid of them, and we've been traveling for 24 hours. So,
And we don't speak your language, so I'm tired. I just want to get a shower and go to bed.
It's such a fine line between being personal and giving guests their space. And, we've been 31 times super hosts at this point. The number keeps going up. I'm sure the intro on this podcast, I hope, Rory, when I record this, I'll say 31 times, but we just got 31. We've
Nice.
met our guests, not counting friends and family. Like, I think we've met people staying at our properties that we didn't know going into the relationship, probably under 2 hands worth of times, maybe 3, 15 times in total ever. And part of me makes that feel so impersonal, but the other part of me is like, I think people like this. I think people like the automated check-in. They like knowing that we're available by text or phone if they need us. They don't need us knocking on the door. There have been a couple times that we've been up in New Hampshire at the properties and we see our guests there and we don't even tell them that we're the owners and the hosts, and we're staying next door, and we're not peering on them. We're just giving everyone their space. But sometimes
sometimes like there'll be the moment, like Rory, if I'm walking by on the lake or something and a guest sees me, they may recognize my face, and then I'll introduce myself, and usually those turn into like really good friendly conversations that you get to learn a little bit about the guests, but we do try to give everybody their space.
Yeah. I think space is always nice. I think for us, well, for me at least, I can't speak for Eric, but for me, there's two times I feel like I don't want an Airbnb host around. And that is when I'm exhausted and I have zero mental capacity to handle all of your questions right now. Like, I need to get dinner for my 4 kids, and I need to get a shower, and I need to get unpacked, and I have stuff I have to do. I have to keep living life. So that can be frustrating. And then the second is anytime I feel like a host is doing like a checkup, I that just feels like it just feels like they don't trust you or something, and they're coming to like look at the house for some reason. You feel like you need to clean, like you feel like it's almost like your parent is coming and like you're this 12-year-old kid and they're coming to inspect your room or something. Like, oh, I don't like that.
Yeah. That's great advice. We never do that. We try to stay away altogether. There might be some times we have to send a service person over. Like if it's a contractor that is
Yeah.
normally going to be there or something, and we've had guests that are understanding for all that. If it's like routine pest control service or something, you might see somebody outside. I mean, like anytime we pump a septic tank, we make sure that we block the calendar off just so guests aren't there for that because it can get a little stinky.
Yeah.
And then there's situations where if we need to get a handyman over there or something, usually we communicate with the guest, and if it's a problem that they want solved during the stay, then it's understandable that somebody goes over there, right? Like, oh, we need a plumber to go over there, and yeah, that would make sense for you to do.
Yeah.
Rory, it's such a fascinating. r- Go ahead.
I was gonna say it. I would also keep in mind with that though, from the guest perspective, there's a big difference between sending a uh a plumber that has a van and stuff like that, and creepy Uncle Joe that just he's a handmade man that pulls up in his pickup truck with no marking. We've had some people send service workers, and they've made us really uncomfortable. So there's a big difference. Like send a pro, or I appreciated in Peru the owner there. The couple times somebody had to come, she came too. Now that I really appreciated that. Like she was there, she met with them, because we had one person come to do something and asked us, to pay, and we're like, we're not paying you.
Oh yeah, that was yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, it's different also in situations where you don't speak the same language. So, like, if anyone is listening to this and you have property in a different country, or like even just in a city,
or if you're hosting,
or like
people from
you're
outside of the
hosting
States.
people from out, like yeah, like if people are coming to your short-term rental from other countries, like knowing what language they speak is really nice because if they speak Italian and not English, like don't send a plumber over there without warning the plumber. They don't speak English, so don't even try. Like, just show them your card. They know you're coming. Do your thing. Put your headphones in. Leave them alone. It's awkward. Like, it's just uncomfortable when you don't speak the language and the service provider's trying to just explain everything to you. You're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
We try to, if we send somebody over, we explain who's going over there. Like, hey, it's this company is going to go over there. They'll show up in this van. Or if it's an individual, we tell them the name of the person. Like, and we explain who that person is in relation to our business and our property. Like, so and so is going over there. It's Rory's parents who live down the street. Or so and so is going over there. It's our neighbor, and she cleans the property for us, and this is her name. Or so and so is going over there. Here's our handyman. This is his name. Like, it just we 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 didn't want to be creepy when we're sending over to a property.
No, that's work.
Rory, what kind of questions, final questions do you have for Eric and Marissa about this entire experience and hearing what it's like from expert Airbnb guests?
I have a few. So if when it comes time to settle up and check out, when it comes time to give ratings, as a guest, what's your philosophy on giving ratings? Is 5-star an automatic, or, what are your thoughts on the rating system?
5 star is not automatic. I'm honest to a fault. I live by like honesty is the best policy. And if I don't think you're worth 5 stars, you're not going to get it. And also this goes back to what I was saying, like a 4 or 3 star rating on your property is not a reflection on you as a person. Like it's not saying you're a bad mom or a bad dad, or it just means, hey, you got a little work to do probably, and that's okay. Um, and so for us, the like the ratings, I do feel like I'm very level-headed also. Like I'm very just real with the ratings. Like if I'm expected to rate a 2 bed, like we stayed in multiple 2 bedroom apartments when we were in Argentina. And I was just very understanding with that. I'm like, hey, we're putting 6 people in a 2 bedroom apartment. Like I'm gonna give you more grace. Like yes, you can do this because we have enough beds to make this happen for 2 weeks. It's not ideal, and I'll just tell people that, like, hey, our family stayed here for 2 weeks. If you're more than 4 people, I don't know if I would do this. We wanted to because the location and price was great, and I'm just super honest about it. And then my biggest thing is um I just include what I was told because again, to me, honesty is a really big thing. Like, so if an Airbnb host tells me one thing, I'm gonna hold them accountable to that in the rating. And so if you tell me that you have XYZ and you don't have it, I'm gonna and you don't supply it at some point in the stay. Like if I let you know, hey, this isn't happening, that's gonna be in the rating. Like whatever you tell me is provided needs to be provided.
And I would say how a host responds when we do reach out. Okay, so another thing that is a bit of a pet peeve of mine is when we only get one key. Because like I can be in the I leave and go to the office. Marissa now, if they're not there, like one key is really annoying for a family because we don't go to the same restaurant. It's again, if you're hosting somebody short term and they're on vacation, they're going to probably be doing everything together. But if they're going to be living there for 4, 6, 8 weeks, there's going to be times where they're probably going to go separate directions. And so, yeah. So there's been times where I always mention it, like, hey, is there any possible way to get a second key? And we've had places like, oh yeah, no problem. One place she even said, hey, here's the directions. If you don't mind stopping and getting one cut, I'll pay you back. And that was fine. So we'll leave a higher review for that than if somebody says, no, we just have the one key. Well, you're going to get a lower review because you weren't very helpful.
Yeah, I think
I have
it.
another. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. I just think the ratings are always going to just come back to the relationship aspect. But like by relationship, I don't mean like, are we friends? I mean, like, was it a good working professional relationship? Did we both uphold our ends of what we agreed to? And then when there were issues, either a problem or just, hey, we only have one key. Can we get another one? Or there's not this thing there. Do you mind grabbing one? Or how we handle those ups and downs throughout the 6 months we're at your place, that's going to be reflected in your, like, if you're just super, super rigid and you're like, no, no, no. If you want a can opener, go buy it yourself. If you want a new knife, go buy it yourself. Okay, like, you're the one that said I could live at your house for 6 months, and now you're kind of Anna.
With a fully stocked kitchen.
Yeah, now you're kind of being like a meanie head. So, not
I know
going to do.
it doesn't necessarily support local business, but one trick that Jason's found when something is lacking is Walmart Plus, at least in the areas where we're operating. You can order it and it'll be over in the property in a few hours. And I think just doing that, I think makes people feel good that they were heard. See,
Idea.
Like if they're willing to just shoot it, like the place we're at right now. Again, we took it off Airbnb, but it is listed on Airbnb. They did like the picture thing, like if you want to get a better deal, yeah. And so, like I was just messaging them the other day, and they're like, "Hey, if we buy something on Amazon, are you okay if it gets delivered to the house?" Yeah, like totally, that's fine. Like, so just asking your guests that, because if someone's only there for a weekend or a week, you're probably not going to have time to get Amazon there. So Walmart Plus is definitely the way to go. But if someone's at your house for 3 months, Amazon it. Like they can pick it up. They don't care probably.
we
We've had a couple, yeah, we'll do Walmart Plus, or, you could DoorDash stuff over. I know friends that use DoorDash, and this equivalencies around the world, with getting something to the property relatively quickly. We've done that recently with like a space heater and with some supplies that weren't there. Actually, I had someone staying for 2 weeks, and they mentioned that a drain was draining slowly. And I said, "Hey, can I send over some drain cleaner?" And like I did, it showed up at the door. He put it in there. Everything worked like a charm. It could be really simple like that. These are really simple fixes that technology allows us to solve. And, as a guest, you're probably saying, okay, this host is responsive. They're willing to stop what they're doing, buy something, have it sent to the property, and it addresses the concern they had. The concern with the space heater was at one of our properties, the lower level, which is a finished basement, and the main level are on the same HVAC circuit. So essentially, you set the temperature upstairs, and downstairs might not get as warm. And I agreed with the guest. I said, you know what, you're right. If you think it's a little bit chilly, we have tons of blankets there, but like I'll send a space heater for you, because now I could use that at the property. And now we have a space heater in case another guest has that same issue, and it cost us $80 or so. And then Rory gave us the idea to buy a second space heater for another property that we own that also has a finished part of their basement. And we just brought that to the property this weekend. And I said to Rory, I'm like, why didn't I think about this 7 years ago? We bought this property, but sure enough, sometimes it just takes a guest to bring that thing up, whatever that thing is. And we kind of file that feedback away, and we say, this is something that we need to address immediately, or this is something that we'll file away and say, hey, thank you so much for the suggestion. And then just kind of leave it at that. And then we as hosts say, yes, I should buy that, or no, I shouldn't buy that. Then there's also the third category, which I've mentioned on this podcast before, which are like ridiculous requests, right? And you can imagine sometimes we'll get ridiculous things that we're just like, all right, we're not going to do that. But like, let's just tell the guest, thank you for the feedback. We appreciate hearing that. But like, we're completely not intending to do that thing. And that's how we file feedback.
Yep.
Nice.
No, and I think that just goes back to you being open. Like, you don't have your identity wrapped up in your properties, right? Like, and I think that is the most healthy way to be a host with any, whether it's someone staying for one night or someone staying for 100 nights. Like, if you can separate yourself, who you are, from your property, then you're not going to get offended. Like, I mean, I've honestly had hosts get upset with me when I've told them things exactly like, hey, this shower is draining really slowly. And then they come back with, are you telling me that I don't take care of my house? No, I'm not telling you that at all. I'm telling you this shower is draining slowly. But that tells me that this person's worth is wrapped up in their property. And so that's like my one thing that I tell people all the time. Like, just separate that. Like, don't find your identity in the houses that you own. Like, bad, like, or like information about a house is not criticism on you.
It's we do kind of confound the whole property and style of hosting, and it all goes into that rating that you give. And from my perspective, our perspective, ratings are everything, in as a host, because the algorithm favors it when your ratings are good. That's why you'll see people that are asking for 5-star reviews all the time. We pepper that into our messaging, hoping that you're going to have a 5-star stay, that kind of thing, just to kind of get it in people's head. And, even before we did this full time, when I was working for another company and did this on the weekends, and we had really good reviews, um, switching over to doing this full time and really upping our game, and our reviews have only gone up. Like, our ratings on Airbnb are 4.95, with hundreds and hundreds of people giving reviews to us, and hearing how you judge as a professional guest makes me feel even better that our rating really does reflect the work that we're doing as hosts. Because if someone like you is, it's tough to get that 5-star, and you've given them, but you got to earn it, right? Like, it's not just a, it's not that where a starting point and then everything is downward from there. You got to work your way up to the 5-star. So, Rory, I think
Yeah.
we should get him to stay at one of our places. I don't know. I'm a little nervous. I don't know if Marissa's going to be super critical of us, but I'm pretty sure we have can openers everywhere.
We have plenty of knives and can openers, and our drains work. And if they don't, we'll get you drain cleaner right away. But if you're ever in New England, do come look us up. Jake,
Definitely.
can I ask one last question to kind of end with
Yes,
the
go
bigger
for it.
picture?
Yeah.
A lot of local communities, particularly where housing is expensive, there's an opposition to short-term rentals coming into town and taking up housing that otherwise could be used for long-term people. As people who have used the short-term rentals to see the world and to have longer stays in these communities, what are your thoughts on that? Do you see the short-term rentals as a net positive, a net negative, or something a little more nuanced than that?
I
Yeah,
think it's more nuanced.
I think it's more nuanced as well. So I'm an entrepreneur, I own my own, company. We're able to do this because of the fact, I own a digital marketing agency. And so we're able to, that's how we fund this lifestyle. And so when we get to areas, we get plugged in, to the community and stuff like that. And because there's also a lot of support. Like, we spend a lot more money at, other businesses, at restaurants, a lot of Uber, and so there's that. And so as we've met with people and talk, like, the housing issue isn't directly related. Like, I think the housing issue would have, in a lot of communities, would have been there even without this. Now, where it's the places where we've seen it, where it's become a problem, is when people are coming in and buying, you know, putting in multiple units and only renting them out, short term or things like that.
Yeah, like there are cities where an entire apartment buildings have been bought up.
Yeah.
And they're only short-term rentals, like Airbnb, Verbo, like
Yeah. So
all of this.
we've been in some communities where the local regulation is limited, to a percentage and things like that. And I think that's okay. That helps. But there's pros and cons to both of it. For the most part, the locals that we get to know, are fine with it, because this is going to sound really crass, but the people that are complaining about it a lot of times, um, you know, they were the way it's been told to us many times is they would have been complaining no matter what. And so, yeah, yeah. So it's just, landscapes change, business changes things. And, yeah, so we're definitely aware of it. There are some places that we would not go because of the issues. But yeah.
And I think that like when you're thinking about like the ethical side of this, right? Which is like what we're talking about. I think everyone has to make their own decision, but also understanding like when a city is coming up with their laws, because nowadays a lot of cities have law like we have some cities that love Airbnb, like Mexico City loves Airbnb. Um, they want to see more of it. They want to see love. They want to see how Airbnb can get into more cities in Mexico. Like Mexico City, I think would just like have a parade every day for Airbnb if they could. And then we have other cities like Paris that are like the Parisians are like the hater. Like the average Parisian hates Airbnb. Now, not like the average French person, but the average Parisian hates Airbnb. And I don't tell people in Paris that we're staying in an Airbnb. Like they're like, "Where are you at?" I'm like, "Oh, we're just up the road, there, that way, that way." How'd you find it? Oh, the internet. Like you just like get out of the conversation however you can. Like you're just like, "We're over there."
And
Like
and a lot of times in communities, so in Belfast, the landlord we had there, she was very much like, "Oh, I don't say anything to anybody because nobody likes Airbnb here and it's really bad." Well, I got to talking to some other locals, and no, they don't have problems with Airbnbs that are owned by
yes.
other people from Northern Ireland. Where they get bothered is when people from other countries are coming in, buying up property, and then renting it out at exorbitant
Prices.
prices, that are 3 times what the place would rent for to a local. That's where people run into problems. If it's other locals that are doing it, people don't tend to be as upset.
Yeah, it's true. So I think just figuring out like, hey, the community I'm in, is this like a little more sensitive, like a place like Paris? Um, but like here, like London, no one like anywhere in England, no one cares where you stay when you're in England. Like they don't care if you're in an Airbnb or sleeping under a bridge. They're like, just have a good time. Like we don't care, just have fun. Like they're super chill.
Yeah.
Yeah, from a guest perspective, I think it's important to read the room and the local area, from what you're saying. From a host perspective, it's important to be a good neighbor and to make sure that, what I always tell people is, your visit is their home. So I explain where people live full time near our properties. We try to employ the locals whenever possible with snow plowing, which reminds me I didn't pay my plow person yet from this weekend, Rory. I got to go do that after this. But she knows I'm good for it. Cleaners, handymen, like if we get the locals involved in the property, we get more eyes on the property as well. From a host perspective, that's always a good idea. And, Rory and I have always tried to be members of the community, even though we don't live full time in any of the places that we own, and we don't live full time in the market that we co-host in Provincetown. We are members of those communities. We give back to the communities. We're in them all the time. And we feel like we're as much of a local as someone that lives there full time. So we want to impress that upon our guests that, we are known. We stay in these properties. Our neighbors know us. Please be a good guest because we'll hear if you're not a good guest. And I'll leave it at that. I think Rory and I could have a whole nother episode about a couple incidents of late, but why don't we wrap it up? Since we've been chit-chatting for so long, we've never had guests on this podcast. Rory, I can't believe we've never thought to have guests on the podcast.
I mean, this is where we're getting our best feedback. And probably if you're a host listening to this, I hope you're taking down some notes there because I think this is the real feedback, not just the host talking to each other, but this is the real feedback you need to give a good stay.
Eric and Marissa, do you want to plug what you guys do? I know you're digital nomads, and Eric, you mentioned a agency. Marissa, I'm not sure if you're working also outside of the house or you're keeping the house running full time, which is a job unto itself. But do you want to plug anything that you have going on?
You go for it.
Well, so yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I'm looking forward to starting to be a more regular listener of your podcast. Marissa does want to get into owning rentals, like that's our next thing probably. So excited about that. So I do have a digital marketing agency, but we specifically work with brick and mortar businesses, so people that own local shops. But what we've talked about doing is, I I love entrepreneurship, small businesses, and we have told multiple hosts when we've been in their house, like, hey, we've got some feedback for you because we want you to be successful in this. Like, we're on your side. And so what we've said is if anybody wants to reach out to us, they can email us hello@familyofdashes.com. That's our website. Family of Dashes is kind of our handle, if you will. But if anybody wants to email us at hello@familyofdashes.com, we'd be more than happy to give, a 30-minute free Zoom consultation, jump on Zoom, talk about their property and what they're wanting to do with it. And, if they're wanting to get more digital like there are especially since COVID, people living our lifestyles is rapidly increasing. There are more and more nomads. And so we'd love to have that, offer that consultative call. And yeah. And find out where we are. If you're listening right now, just find out, say, hey, where you are at in the world. And if we happen to be in your city, we'd be even happy to take a look at your property.
I'm sensing another sub niche right here, which is regular short-term rental guests that who are long-term guests who can consult property owners as to how to best reach people like yourself. And believe it or not, I'm sure that's a business. So, I think that's a fantastic idea. So we'll make sure that we put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for appearing on Smart Stay Show. We have really enjoyed this extended conversation. Rory, thank you for your insights. Once again, we'll link up your website in the podcast show notes. And if you've enjoyed this episode, we love 5-star reviews of our podcast and we read all your comments. So please go right ahead. You go to smartstayshow.com if you want to be a guest on the podcast. Until next time, we will see you later. Bye-bye.